Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. With Super Tuesday coming up this week and several states going to the polls to pick who they think should be the GOP presidential nominee, we're going to hear from Dr. Holly Tankersley. She's a political science professor at CCU. But first, we're going to talk about the 7th Congressional District race here in South Carolina. And we're going to hear from Republican Chad Prosser, who's a former Horry County Council Chairman. Chad Prosser, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here, Tim.
You have taken a break from serving the public for, well, just about a year now.
That's right.
You were the head of the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department.
Right.
You've also been on Horry County Council and served as the Horry County Council Chairman. Now you're talking about Congress. Why?
Well, Tim, I think if you look at Washington, Washington's broken. We need solutions coming out of Washington that get people back to work, that reduce the spending that we're seeing, the runaway spending in Washington. And I think we need to send someone from the 7th District that has experience in conservative reform, that's actually brought reform to government, to take that perspective to Washington. And that's why I'm running.
When you look at the 7th District, what do you think is the single biggest issue that is facing the district that can be taken care of in Washington?
Well, the single biggest issue right now is employment. If you look at the 7th District and you look at the counties that comprise the district, every one of those counties has an unemployment rate that's greater than the national average, in some cases, more than twice the national average. We've got to get people back to work, and the way that we do that is to get federal government out of the way, to stop the runaway spending in Washington that is really reducing confidence and impeding job growth.
What about I-73? That's something else that some people say would be a vehicle to bring jobs to those areas, because all of a sudden you'd have a interstate running through them where businesses could locate and have interstate access.
Well, interstates are very important for economic development. They're also important, obviously, for things like hurricane evacuation, which is very important here along the Grand Strand. We need an interstate access to Myrtle Beach. It's the largest destination market on the East Coast without interstate access. That's something that was decided long ago in Washington. We need to hold Washington's feet to the fire. I think there's a way you go about that, not through earmarks, but through providing a delivery system for transportation in this country that actually focuses on priorities, not bridges to nowhere, but high priority projects like I-73. And there are also some other critical infrastructure needs here along the Grand Strand, like the Southern Evacuation Lifeline, and we need someone in Washington focused on those priorities for this district.
What would you do to see I-73 through? If you're elected, you'll spend a year at least with a president from a different party, so it might be kind of difficult to get an I-73 type agenda pushed forward.
Well, it's a long-term process. I think we've made progress on I-73. I look at it in very simple terms, in terms of a reform that we brought to County Council when I was there, and that is we had over 1,200 miles of dirt roads in Horry County, none of which were getting paved because the money was split politically among council members. We pooled that money, we put a priority list together, we were able to make historic progress in terms of paving roads in Horry County. We need that same kind of reform brought to Washington.
When you look at the 7th District, this new 7th District, it's kind of its own animal there. You have the Grand Strand, you have the PD, you have tourism versus, like you were talking about, the low unemployment. Is this race going to come down to the PD versus the Grand Strand? And you have ties to both, being a Florence native.
That's right. I was born in Florence. I grew up in Florence, so I understand that part of the PD. Obviously, I've been elected here in Horry County. I have a business in Georgetown County, so I understand a good bit about the different parts of this district. I think there are a lot of common traits that we have within the district that will benefit from having this as one comprehensive district, but the problems are slightly different. Obviously tourism is the largest industry here on the coast. When you get inland, it's more manufacturing, and so the priorities differ, but the overall priority of reforming the federal government is what we need to focus on.
I want to talk about a couple issues that the federal government, I suppose, has imposed on the Grand Strand. The swimming pool rule, with where lifts have to be in any business setting for a pool. A lot of smaller renters, people who are renting out their property managers, they're not crazy about this rule. And you also have the glass enclosure rule, which says that glass enclosures have to be over the big resort pool, or cannot be over the big resort pools because of big, strong winds could come and pose danger. What do you think about those two rules, which businesses say are crippling?
Well, this is a classic case of federal government overreach. I mean, it's a rule made in Washington, not taking into account the situation here on the ground. Having glass enclosures during the winter so that you extend the season in a key tourism market like Myrtle Beach is critical, and that can be done safely without jeopardizing those properties during hurricane season. But typical of the federal government, they make a broad rule, try to apply it everywhere, and then it ends up hurting businesses here at home. And that's the type of thing we need change. That is what hurts job growth and hurts small business and takes away from the confidence that people would otherwise have to go out and hire and expand their businesses. We need to change that.
There's been a lot of talk about alternative energy and our coast being a source of wind energy. The federal government to this point has been a large source of money for a lot of these companies to develop wind energy. Where do you stand on energy, renewable energy, that type of thing as it relates to us?
Well, I think if we're going to address the energy problems that we have as a nation, we do need to look at domestic sources of energy. It's critical that we're able to exploit those resources, both from a national security standpoint as well as an economic standpoint, because that does bring jobs to the area. When you look here, I think the primary resource that we talk about is natural gas offshore. That would need to be done in a way that doesn't jeopardize tourism. I've also been in charge of the State Park Service. I understand a little bit about the environmental issues that are involved, but I think it can be done in a way so that it doesn't impact the coastline and what you see off of our coastline, but also bring jobs, you know, to South Carolina, to the coast here, to the port of Georgetown. There's a lot of potential there, and we need to exploit it. Unfortunately, the current administration in Washington has been standing in the way of that type of exploration.
What role do you want to see government play over time in people's lives? I think that's a fair question to ask, because it seems like that's the biggest fundamental difference between a lot of candidates and definitely the two parties right now.
It absolutely is. Government needs to play as limited a role as possible. You know, the way that we create jobs is the private sector creates jobs. I'm in business. I understand how to create jobs. It's not government creating jobs. It's government getting out of the way on issues like health care mandates, on taxes, on the rising deficit and the huge national debt that's now over $15 trillion. Those things need to be addressed so that the confidence level of businesses and investors goes up and they can go out and create the jobs.
Okay. Chad Prosser, candidate for the 7th District. We're going to continue our conversation. I want to move on to topics like foreign policy and health care after we take a break.
Great.
Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Chad Prosser is running for the 7th District congressional seat, the new seat that's just been formed. A lot of people running for this seat. How do you differentiate yourself between, I guess, how many candidates do we have now, 7 or 8?
It changes every day.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, I have the experience. I have the experience in bringing conservative reform to government. I did it as chairman of Horry County Council. I served on the council over 8 years. I did it in the 8 years that I served under Governor Mark Sanford, the most fiscally conservative governor in a generation, running the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. So I bring that experience to the job. I'm also very deeply connected to this district. As I said, I was born in Florence. I grew up there. I've been elected here in Horry County. You know, I have a business in Georgetown County. So I know the different parts of this district very well. I care very deeply about this district and about this nation, and I think we've got to have good business folks stepping forward to fulfill these roles. That's why I ran for county council years ago, and that's why I'm running for Congress now.
I want to talk about some of the bigger, the broader national issues. Let's start off with health care. Just even some Democrats I've had sitting here have said that they want to see parts of Obamacare, Obama's health care plan, repealed. What do you think? Does the whole thing need to be thrown out the window part and parcel, or are there parts of it that should stay, parts of it that should be dismantled?
It really is just like the tax code. It's gotten so cumbersome and so confused that I think you just have to throw it out and start over. And not only are we seeing the economic impact of it beginning to hit even before a lot of the broader mandates come into play. And I know this because I've just been through this with my own company and our health insurance and looking at what's required, and you see these increases in cost, in which Obamacare is not addressing. It's adding people to the Medicaid rolls. It's adding trillions of dollars of cost to an already overburdened medical system and not truly addressing reduction of cost. So that's one part of it. But now we're starting to see the social engineering and the overreach from the Obama administration using this with religious organizations, telling them what they can and cannot do or what they must do for their employees. So this, this is something that just needs to be scrapped, and we need to start over.
How would you approach it? What do you think would be an ideal government role in healthcare?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to, on the Medicaid side, get as many people off of the Medicaid rolls as possible. The way you do that is by providing jobs. And so the more people we can get employed, the more we can reduce the folks off the Medicaid rolls. That should be a goal, not adding people to the Medicaid rolls. We need to look at true reform of cost. Right now, you have a system where everything increases the cost. It's the regulations, the federal regulations that are there, not because patients need them, not because doctors and health providers and nurses want them, but because the federal government is in between, and it adds cost at every single stage. We need to bring the same kind of efficiency and accountability that I was able to bring to the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism here in the state. We need to bring that to our federal health care delivery system.
Let's move away from healthcare and talk about foreign policy
Sure.
for a moment. Right now we're seeing a powder keg in Afghanistan after some Qurans were accidentally burned at a base over there. A lot of people say that this could be put us back 10 years almost as far as what's happening over there. What should we be doing in Afghanistan?
Well, I think what we have to look at is, the first priority of any government is to provide for the common defense of the nation. And I think that's not only providing for the defense here at home, but we need to be cognizant of our men and women in the military who are abroad, looking at their lives, which are constantly in danger. And so that needs to be part of the foreign policy equation. I think we need to look at what should be accomplished to help transition to Afghani control and come back home. We need to look at the lessons that we've learned through 10 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan and really take a hard look at our foreign policy in terms of where we get involved and why we get involved.
We also see what's happening in Syria right now. A lot of people, a lot of lay people, I suppose, saying, "Oh, why aren't we helping out the Syrians?"
Right.
How would you want to see, as a congressman, how would you want to see our policy with Syria advance right now?
Well, and people compare that with Libya. It's a good bit different. It's the sectarian violence is even more divided in Syria, and Syria is much more strategically positioned than, say, Libya, which is in North Africa. Syria is in a different place with its common borders in the Middle East, so it's a much more dangerous situation that's happening there. Obviously, the Assad regime is terribly oppressive, and we need to do everything we can diplomatically to support regime change in Syria. But we need to be very careful about the balance of power in the Middle East and what we do in terms of our involvement. It's not a country where we can go in and get involved on the ground. Again, I think we need to really value American lives first, and that means the lives of our military we'd be putting in jeopardy. But we need to put as much pressure as possible. I think over time that will resolve. It probably will take a little longer than what you saw even in Libya.
All right. New question. I'm throwing into the mix now for the candidates with a primary happening as we tape this on Tuesday in Michigan and Arizona.
Right.
Who do you like for the Republican nomination for president?
Well, I can tell you, whichever Republican comes out of the primary, I certainly will support and will be better than who we're seeing right now. So, I learned a long time ago in this business that you run your own race and don't get involved with other candidates. I think we've got a good field that's running, and you know, it's part of the process. And I do think the Republican Party will come back together once we get through this presidential primary process and come together and focus on the race in November, which is where our focus should be.
Safe answer.
Yeah.
Last question for you. Why should I vote for you?
I have the experience, I care about this district, I know what needs to be done, and I can go to Washington and get it done. I have that track record in the private sector and in the public sector.
All right. Chad Prosser, Republican candidate for the 7th Congressional District. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.